This discussion reframes our global fight against disease not as a war, but as a profound modern-day ritual of purification. It argues that while we use the language of military conflict for a sense of control, our collective behaviors, from masking to social distancing, more closely resemble ancient ceremonies, with the pathogen acting as a symbolic scapegoat for our deepest societal anxieties. The pandemic, therefore, becomes less of an enemy to be conquered and more of a mirror, reflecting uncomfortable truths about our fragility, our interconnectedness, and our broken relationship with the natural world. If we strip away the familiar metaphor of war, what fundamental patterns of human behavior does this ritual truly reveal about us?
What if everything we thought we knew about our fight against disease was actually a profound misunderstanding? What if the enemy we chase isn't just some invader, but maybe a mirror, reflecting something, ancient about ourselves, about our deepest fears, our societal patterns? Today, we're taking a deep dive into how we perceive and how we respond to global health crises. We've been given some incredibly insightful material that genuinely challenges the very language we use, the words we pick to describe epidemics. It really forces you to look at familiar situations through an entirely fresh lens.
Yeah, and our mission today, really, is to unpack two powerful, kind of interconnected perspectives. They really help make sense of these incredibly complex events. One view suggests these widespread illnesses aren't just biological battles, but deeply ingrained rituals, almost sacred things humanity has done for, millennia. And the other explores the unique, often overlooked silent warfare that disease wages against us. So we'll pull out the core insights from these ideas, try to connect the dots, and hopefully help you see the familiar in a totally new way, making even really complicated ideas, easy to grasp and follow along with.
Exactly. It's not just about understanding pathogens, is it?
No, not at all. It's about understanding us, our fears, our values, those ancient patterns that just seem to resurface whenever humanity is truly tested.
Right. And we're drawing from some analyses that really dig into the sacred dimensions of how we responded to the pandemic, and also the hidden geometry of survival when illness spreads far and wide. This journey should be, valuable and, we hope, easy to follow, so you can really get a thorough understanding of how these crises shape our world and, our individual lives too.
Okay, so let's unpack this right from the start. When we talk about disease, epidemics, what language immediately comes to mind for you? I mean, I'd bet most of us instinctively reach for military terms, wouldn't we? We talk about fighting the virus, right? The front lines and hospitals. We look for magic bullets from science. We want victory over the pathogen. It's everywhere, this language of conquest, invasion.
Yeah.
It feels almost natural somehow.
It really does. And what's absolutely fascinating here is just how incredibly seductive that war metaphor is.
Yeah.
As one of our sources puts it, it offers a kind of proscenium arch for a grand drama, like the frame around a big stage play.
Okay, yeah. It sets up this whole epic narrative. You get a clear villain, the virus, a righteous hero, that's us, naturally. And this story arc that seems to move, inevitably towards triumph. And this military way of talking, as Susan Sontag pointed out so brilliantly in her work on illness as metaphor, it gives us a powerful sense of agency.
Agency.
Exactly. It makes us feel like we're doing something, like we have some control against that awful feeling of passivity when you're just sick.
Right, helplessness.
Yeah, helplessness. It counters that feeling. It helps us feel active, empowered, not just victims of, biological chaos.
So it simplifies things, gives us a clear narrative.
Precisely. This war language offers a very clear, almost comforting story, us, the heroes, against this distinct, malevolent enemy. But the reality of a pathogen, a virus, a bacterium, it's just far more indifferent. The virus has no malice, no ideology. It doesn't have a strategic objective beyond just replicating itself.
It's not trying to hurt us.
Not in the way we think of trying. It's really just a sliver of genetic information wrapped in a protein coat. That's how one source describes it. A mindless, yet incredibly well-evolved parasite. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't even know you exist. It just exists. It seeks to persist, to propagate in the most efficient way possible. It's like a flame seeking oxygen, maybe, or a river flowing downhill. Its existence isn't a moral statement. It's just pure biological imperative.
Okay, so if we cling so tightly to this language, this war talk, this language of annihilation, what does it obscure? What are we missing? What does it stop us from seeing?
That's the crucial question, really, because the limitation of the war metaphor is, it's significant. A war, by definition, needs a distinct enemy. and other that has to be demonized, fought, destroyed.
Right, you need something to fight against.
Exactly. And that framing simplifies this incredibly complex ecological relationship we have with the microbial world. It boils it down to what one source calls a Manichaean struggle.
Like good versus evil.
Exactly. Black and white. Absolute good, absolute evil. It makes us think of ourselves as totally separate from the threat when really we're deeply interconnected. The problem is this isn't really a battle of wills in the human sense. It's a fundamental ongoing part of life on this planet. Microbes aren't outside nature, they are nature. They were here long before us. So to declare war on a virus, as one source puts it so eloquently, is like declaring war on a shadow cast by our own bodies, on a distorted echo of our own biological imperative to persist.
Wow. Okay, a shadow cast by our own bodies. That's a powerful image.
Isn't it? Think about that. The virus, in a really profound way, mirrors our own biology. It reflects light's relentless drive to continue, adapt, reproduce. It's not something entirely alien. It's something that pushes the boundaries of our own existence, uses our own machinery. So if we only focus on annihilation, on winning the war, we miss the chance to understand this deeper, maybe symbiotic connection. We miss the ecological perspective.
And that leads us to the ritual idea.
This is precisely where the war metaphor starts to break down, I think, where you see its limits and where the logic of ritual starts to make more sense. See, a ritual, unlike a war, doesn't necessarily need a thinking, malevolent enemy. What it does need is an object of symbolic power, a focal point.
A focus for what?
For a community's unresolved anxieties, its tensions, its fears. It needs something that can represent all the complex stuff we struggle to articulate, something to give shape to that formless dread we feel. And that shift, it's subtle, but it's profound. It moves our understanding away from this idea of a linear campaign that has to be won towards something more like a circular, recurring performance, one with a deeper, maybe unconscious meaning and ultimately a transformative purpose.
That's a powerful and maybe a bit unsettling idea, that we might be doing something far older, far more deeply wired into us than just waging war. So if we follow that thread, it leads us straight into this concept of disease as a powerful ancient ritual.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, one of the most striking parallels that comes up is the ancient Hebrew ritual of the scapegoat. It's described really meticulously in the book of Leviticus. Try to imagine the scene. It's the Day of Atonement, this incredibly profound day of purification for the whole community.
Okay.
The high priest takes a goat and he lays his hands on it. And over this innocent animal, he confesses all the community's sins, their wrongdoings, their transgressions, all the collective impurities that have built up over the year. And this goat, now symbolically loaded up with all these communal burdens, is then driven out into the desolate wilderness, left to perish.
Taking the sins with it.
Exactly. It effectively carries the people's sins and impurity away, cleansing the community. But the crucial point here, and it's really profound, is that the goat itself wasn't inherently evil. It wasn't guilty of anything.
It's just a vessel.
Just a vessel, merely a chosen symbol for something much deeper, something collective.
So the question then becomes, in our modern world, our scientific world, is the pathogen, this microscopic thing, is it serving a similar symbolic role? Is it basically our modern scapegoat, carrying our collective baggage?
Precisely. I think that's the argument being made. The pathogen becomes this convenient vessel for all our modern anxieties. Think about it. In a world that feels increasingly complex, maybe out of control, where communities feel fractured, global forces seem overwhelming. The virus offers this terrifyingly simple, unifying principle.
A single enemy everyone can focus on.
Exactly. A single identifiable threat that ironically makes neighbors of us all because it crosses borders and ignores social divides, even while the measures we take to stop it physically force us apart, creating new kinds of isolation.
That paradox again.
Yeah. And onto its, spiky microscopic form, we unconsciously project our deepest fears. Fears about globalization, maybe, porous borders, the fragility of our supply chains, the unseen consequences of messing with the environment, a general loss of control.
All that stuff.
All that stuff gets loaded onto it. The pathogen becomes this physical manifestation of our complex interconnectedness, this bond that we both, cherish for the opportunities it gives us, but increasingly dread for the vulnerabilities it exposes. It becomes the visible shape of all our invisible anxieties.
And what's really striking about this scapegoat idea, how does it actually show up? In our actions, our objects. If the pathogen is the scapegoat, what are the sins we're sort of confessing onto it? And what is our collective response, the things we all did? Tell us about how we police a kind of moral order during a crisis.
Oh, it reveals a huge amount, a truly unsettling amount about our human nature, maybe. Think about how we instinctively reacted. The fervent hunt for asymptomatic carriers, remember that? The mass testing, the contact tracing, the isolation measures, all pursued with what one of our sources calls religious fervor.
Yeah, there was an intensity there.
Right. It feels akin to searching for the hidden sins within the community. It wasn't just about stopping biological spread. It felt like it was also about identifying and isolating sources of perceived moral impurity.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, consider the person who broke quarantine. They didn't just violate a health guideline, did they? In the eyes of many, they became a kind of heretic.
Right, someone who betrayed the collective effort.
Exactly. Someone who violated the sacred rules of the new social contract, endangering everyone else. Or an unmasked face. In certain situations, it transformed from just a face into a sign of sacrilege. A visible defiance of the collective purification effort, a statement of rebellion against the new rules. So we weren't just fighting a disease, we were actively policing the boundaries of a moral order, desperately trying to cast out the impurity that in our minds had taken root among us.
Wow, policing a moral order.
Yeah. And this framework, it really reinforces the core idea. The language of war gives us this false sense of command, this illusion that we're in charge. But the framework of ritual, it reveals a deeper, maybe more unsettling truth. We are not truly in control here, not in the way we think. We are, in a fundamental sense, supplicants. We're enacting ancient patterns of behavior, hoping to appease a force far older and way more indifferent than any human enemy.
Supplicants, not soldiers.
Right. And when we meticulously wash our hands for 20 seconds, think about it, are we doing more than just cleansing germs? Are we performing modern-day ablutions, acts of ritual purification? Are we washing ourselves not just of physical contaminants, but of our complicity in the whole complex web of causes, social, environmental, that led to this crisis in the first place?
That's unsettling, yeah. To think of ourselves as supplicants, not the masters of science we imagine. But, okay, even if it is ritualistic, isn't there still an undeniable element of war here? A silent war, as one of the sources calls it. One waged with devastating, often invisible efficiency.
Yeah, when we think of war, the images that pop up are usually, trenches, artillery, big battles, spectacle, visible destruction tearing things apart.
Yeah.
But history shows us a different kind of war, doesn't it? One waged without banners, without generals, without the roar of guns, but often leaving behind this profound silence, this landscape of abscess. I mean, think back. The Black Death hollowed Europe in the 14th century, wiped out maybe a third of the population, fundamentally changed society. Or the Aztec Empire, undone less by Spanish muskets, really, than by the smallpox they carried unknowingly, the cursed cargo.
Yeah, disease as a weapon, intended or not. Exactly. And even the staggering losses of World War I, tragically eclipsed by the quiet global devastation of the 1918 flu pandemic. It killed more people than the trenches ever did. These were wars fought not with steel, but with these unseen biological agents. Silent killers.
And that raises a really important question, doesn't it? If war is basically an organized conflict for dominance, then what is an epidemic but a relentless war against the very continuation of the human body, against the sovereignty of our own breath, our collective health? The battlefield in this kind of war is terrifyingly intimate. It's our own skin, our own lungs.
Inside us.
Exactly. The trenches aren't dug in some distant field. They're carved within us. Microscopic fights happening inside ourselves. And the casualties, they're not just numbers on a list. They're tragically written into the genealogy of families. Whole branches just cut short. Stories that never get told. It leaves this indelible mark on generations. It's a conflict that's deeply personal, profoundly pervasive, and utterly indifferent to our suffering.
And it blurs the lines too, right? Between enemy and self.
That's what's profoundly different, and maybe more insidious than human wars. Epidemics blur that line. Viruses, bacteria, they aren't foreign like invading soldiers from another country. They exploit the intricate machinery of our own cells. They turn us into unwilling collaborators in our own sickness.
Our own bodies conscripted.
Yeah. Our very biology gets hijacked. We become, quite literally, both battlefield and weapon. Our bodies host the pathogen, and then our breath, our touch, transmits it. Is there any more chilling way to think about war? Your own body turned against itself, its systems co-opted for some alien purpose. It's a truly insidious kind of conflict. Strikes right at the core of our being.
That idea is incredibly chilling. Our body conscripted against itself. But if a pathogen truly has no will, no hatred, like you said, does that make it even harder for us to grasp, to fight? How do we even strategize against something so indifferent?
Well, that's another profound difference, isn't it? It leads to what one source calls war without hatred. Traditional human wars are fueled by powerful, recognizable human emotions, right? Hatred, ideology, greed, fear. The whole messy mix of the human will. We can, at least in theory, understand the motives of our human enemies. But disease, it has no will. The pathogen doesn't hate you. It doesn't want revenge. It has no ideology. It just exists. It seeks replication like a flame seeks oxygen. Just that indifferent primal biological drive. It's pure unthinking force of nature.
So is that more terrifying? War without hatred?
That's the disturbing question the source raises. Is war without hatred more terrifying than war drenched in it? When an enemy doesn't negotiate, doesn't surrender, doesn't even recognize you as an enemy, how do you even orient yourself? How do you fight that? There are no Homeric gods to appease here, right? No divine messengers you can bribe with sacrifices. No diplomatic channels like in geopolitics.
Just biology.
Just the indifferent arithmetic of transmission, immunity, mutation. Cold, hard numbers and processes. And yet, despite this huge difference, we still instinctively use war language, don't we? Frontline workers, fighting the virus, crushing the curve. Why? Because it uniquely captures the totality of mobilization, that feeling of being completely engulfed in a struggle for survival. It demands this all-encompassing societal response.
But it can blind us too.
It can. That same language, while it mobilizes us, can blind us to the fundamental nature of this conflict. This isn't the battle that can be won in the usual sense. Why? Because evolution never sleeps. Unlike armies that need rest, supplies, treaties, microbes don't. They are always rehearsing for the next assault. Constantly adapting, mutating, finding new ways around our defenses.
So maybe weather is a better metaphor, like a storm.
Perhaps. It captures the unexpected, overwhelming nature of these events that sweep across the globe. Unpredictable, unstoppable sometimes. But even weather falls short, doesn't it? Because disease learns, it mutates, it adapts. In a biological sense, it remembers past encounters through natural selection, which makes it feel more like an enemy general constantly revising tactics than just a passing storm. It's this perpetual arms race.
Okay, so whether we see it as a profound ritual or as this relentless, silent war, our collective responses involve specific actions, specific objects, specific gestures. Let's dig into those, the artifacts and gestures of this unique global phenomenon, because they tell us so much about what we're really doing, maybe unconsciously. Okay, let's unpack this. If our global response to a pandemic is, at least in part, a kind of ritual, what are the specific artifacts? What are the gestures of this new modern liturgy of purification? I mean, think about the things that just became ubiquitous almost overnight. Things that weren't part of our daily lives before, but suddenly took on these new, deeper meanings.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating is how quickly the mundane, the ordinary, transformed into the sacred, or at least the symbolically loaded. Every powerful ritual, if you look through history, transforms physical space and everyday objects. It imbues the ordinary with profound symbolic meaning. And our modern liturgy, this global purification ritual we all participated in, it quite literally reinscribed the entire map of our world with new invisible boundaries of purity and danger.
How so?
Well, the very air we breathed became suspect, didn't it? And the things we touched, doorknobs, grocery carts, elevator buttons, became potential vectors of contagion, of impurity.
Right. Suddenly everything felt potentially dangerous.
Exactly. And consider the simple face mask. Ostensibly, it's just public health gear, right? Designed to filter breath, prevent transmission. Simple function. But it very quickly acquired this profound symbolic weight. It became a kind of veil separating your inner world, your breath, from the shared, potentially contaminated outer air. It served as this constant physical reminder of the unseen threat lurking around us. And it became a tangible mark of participation in the collective ritual of protection.
Like showing you were part of the effort.
Precisely. To wear it, for many, signaled piety. Your commitment to the social contract, a visible sign of solidarity, civic duty, and to refuse it in certain contexts, well, that made you an apostate, didn't it? A dangerous non-believer in the shared cause, a potential threat to the community's purity. So the mask, it transformed the human face, the very center of our identity, our emotion, our expression, into a site of potential contagion, a source of ritual impurity. It forced this strange intimacy with our own mortality every time you put it on to go outside, a constant reminder of vulnerability.
Wow, and then there was distancing. That felt very ritualistic too.
Oh, absolutely. The act of distancing, the 6-foot gap or 2 meters, whatever it was where you were, It wasn't just a scientific buffer zone, was it? It rapidly evolved into a kind of sacred perimeter, a personal tabernacle of uncontaminated space.
Yeah, that little bubble around you.
You must have felt it, that strange, often awkward choreographed dance we all started doing. In grocery aisles, on sidewalks, waiting in lines. It was this silent negotiation of invisible circles, an unspoken agreement to maintain a safe, ritualistic space between us. We became, in a way, atoms of anxiety, repelling each other with a force field of mutual suspicion.
Atoms of anxiety.
And that enforced separation, it atomizes the community precisely when the shared threat should be binding it together. That's the profound paradox at the heart of the ritual. To save the whole, the parts must be held asunder. And human touch, think about that. Once the ultimate gesture of comfort, connection, solidarity, it suddenly became a vector of transmission, a taboo. That's a deeply unsettling shift in our basic social fabric.
Definitely. And the home. What about our homes?
The home itself was profoundly reconsecrated. It shifted. Once just a private retreat, a place for comfort, relaxation, it quickly transformed into a sanctuary. In the most literal sense, a sealed refuge from a perceived, polluted, dangerous outer world. The very threshold, the front door, became this liminal space, transition zone where the profane outside world had to be ritually cleansed before crossing into the sacred interior.
Like leaving the dirt outside.
Exactly. We started shedding our shoes at the door, maybe disinfecting groceries on the porch, meticulously washing our hands, almost like surgeons scrubbing in or priests preparing for a holy rite. These weren't just hygienic practices. They felt like ablutions, acts of ritual cleansing, small repeated acts of purification that provided this fragile psychological sense of order and control when everything outside felt like overwhelming chaos.
That makes so much sense looking back. These everyday things took on such huge weight. And then, of course, there's the ultimate sacrament in this whole liturgy. The quest for the Holy Grail, the thing that promised a return to grace, a way back to normalcy.
Indeed. The most potent sacrament in this entire global ritual was, undoubtedly, the vaccine. It quickly became, in essence, the holy water of modern science, a blessed substance injected directly into the temple of the body, offering protection, maybe even absolution. The frantic global race to develop it, manufacture it, distribute it, that wasn't just a scientific marathon, was it? It felt like a quest for a holy grail, a tangible token of salvation.
And the proof of vaccination, the certificate, the passport.
That became its outward sign, the physical mark separating the initiated from the uninitiated, the clean from the potentially unclean. It promised not just immunity, but redemption, a return to the state of grace we called normalcy, a release from the cycle of fear and restriction that had gripped everyone.
But it also caused huge divisions, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Like any powerful religious sacrament throughout history, its introduction created significant schism, division. The believers and the skeptics formed two warring faiths, as one source puts it, each side convinced of its own righteousness, each seeing the other as dangerously deluded, maybe even morally compromised. For one group, the needle was deliverance, the path to communal safety. For the other, it felt like a violation, an imposition of an unwanted ritual, a threat to bodily autonomy. And this, as our sources point out, this is not the language of scientific debate. It is the language of holy war. It really echoes historical conflicts fueled by deeply held, often irreconcilable beliefs. It just underscores how deeply these responses tapped into ancient, ritualistic patterns of human behavior and belief. It transformed a public health intervention into this profound social and moral battleground.
These are such powerful images. Really helps make sense of our collective behavior in a way we probably didn't consider at the time. But beyond the specific rituals, the actions, what is this entire experience, this oracle, what is it screaming at us? From the deepest parts of our collective consciousness, what's the message we just can't ignore? In ancient times when disaster struck, famine, plague, earthquake societies didn't just look for a cure. They turned to oracles for meaning. They thought the disaster was a sign, right? That the natural or moral order was out of whack and some message was being delivered. So what are our modern oracles in a pandemic? And what are they telling us in a way that's, clear and understandable for everyone?
That's a great way to frame it, because our pandemic in its totality is an oracle. It's a profound messenger delivering a difficult truth. And the tools we use to try and divine its meaning aren't smoke and trance or reading animal entrails, but the incredibly sophisticated instruments of genomic sequencing and epidemiological modeling.
It's a science.
The science becomes the divination tool. The virologists, the data scientists, the public health experts, they are our new augurs, the modern-day diviners of fate, They're computer screens filled with complex algorithms, cascading waves of colored maps showing spread. They're like polished obsidian mirrors for scrying the future, allowing us to trace the virus's cryptic lineages like they were genealogies of vengeful gods. They projected spread in scenarios that often sound like, well, apocalyptic prophecies. Each new variant becomes a fresh omen, each statistical peak a dire pronouncement about what might be coming next.
So, given all that modern spraying, what does it all mean for us? What is the undeniable message this oracle is screaming at us from the depths of our collective experience in a way anyone listening can really grasp?
It's screaming multiple, absolutely critical messages, loud and clear. First, it's delivering a profound message about boundaries. Really profound. For a century, maybe more, we've preached this gospel of relentless connection, haven't we? A flat world where capital, goods, people just flow across borders with frictionless ease. We imagined ourselves masters of this globally integrated system.
Yeah, globalization as the ultimate goal.
Right. We built this gleaming, intricate global machine, a kind of technological Tower of Babel dedicated to hyperconnectivity. But the pandemic brutally revealed that this very machine, this network we're so proud of, it's also a perfect transmission vector for our own vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
The same flight paths carrying tourists and business travelers also carry breath, and in that breath, the invisible passenger of disease.
So our connections are also our weaknesses.
Exactly. The message is painfully clear. Our connections, which we cherish for prosperity, for convenience, are also our conduits for contagion. The very system built for progress is, paradoxically, the architecture of our peril. The oracle tells us unequivocally, no wall is high enough, no nation and island when the impurity is airborne. We are far more interconnected and far more vulnerable than we may be dared to believe.
Okay, message 1. Boundaries are porous, connections are risks. What else?
Second, there's a stark message about nature, about our relationship with it. For generations, humanity has largely treated the natural world as a standing reserve, like a giant warehouse of resources just there for the taking, for our immediate needs. We've pushed aggressively into the last wild places on Earth, felled ancient forests, drained vital wetlands, disrupted ecosystems that have been stable for millennia. And in doing so, we have, in a very real sense, shaken a vast viral library off its ancient shelves. We've released pathogens that have long coexisted pretty harmlessly with their animal hosts in those environments.
By disturbing their homes.
Precisely. We've trespassed into these deep, complex biological systems, the chthonic realms, as one source puts it, the underworlds of biodiversity where these entities reside. And they have, in turn, followed us home. The zoonotic leap, that jump of a pathogen from animal to human. It's not just some random accident of nature. It is a direct, undeniable consequence of our ongoing intrusion and exploitation. The oracle's voice, maybe carried on the wings of a bat or the feet of a pangolin, whispers this terrible truth. You cannot break the web of life without becoming entangled in its unraveling. The ghost in our cells, the viral invader, is often a specter from the wilderness we have desecrated.
Wow. Okay, so boundaries, nature. What's the third message?
Finally, and this is perhaps the most important, the most personal, it's a deeply revealing message about ourselves, about who we truly are as societies. The pandemic didn't create the deep inequalities, the systemic fragility, the political rot within our societies. It merely illuminated them with the merciless glare of an operating theater lamp.
It exposed what was already there.
Exactly. It held up this stark, unyielding mirror and forced us to look, really look, at what was already profoundly broken. We saw with devastating clarity, didn't we, how the risk fell heaviest on the poor, the marginalized, the essential workers we applauded from our windows, but often treated as disposable. We saw how the disease preyed on bodies, already weakened by the pre-existing conditions of poverty, systemic racism, lack of adequate health care. We watched our political systems, often paralyzed by polarization, misinformation, fail the most basic test of protecting their citizens, struggling to act coherently, effectively. And we saw the profound loneliness, the mental anguish that festered just beneath the surface of our busy, productive lives, exposed for all to see. The virus, in this sense, was the ultimate diagnostic agent, the radioactive tracer that flowed through the body politic and revealed all of its hidden malignancies. It forced us to confront the deep cracks in our societal foundations.
That's incredibly powerful and sobering. The oracle, it seems, doesn't offer easy comfort, does it? Its real purpose seems to be delivering a truth so stark that it compels change. A sacrifice of old ways, maybe, a fundamental realignment with reality, or just with ourselves. The question then, the really big question, is whether we are truly capable of listening to such a profound message and actually acting on it. But okay, let's shift slightly. What about the tools we use in this silent war? our medicine. How does medicine fit into this complex picture of conflict, connection, maybe even ritual? So if we're looking at this pandemic's experience partly as a kind of war, then medicine is clearly our arsenal, right? Our weaponry against the enemy. But it's a really peculiar kind of a weapon, isn't it? It's not designed just to destroy, to annihilate the enemy completely. It's often more about protecting and restoring, guiding life back towards balance, towards equilibrium.
That's exactly the paradox, and it's fascinating. Medicine's weapons, think about the scalpel, the vaccine, the antibiotic. They aren't really swords designed for just outright annihilation, for that final decisive blow. Instead, they're described in one source as forms of persuasion.
Persuasion? How so?
Well, they're designed to gently guide the body's own intricate systems back towards equilibrium. They aim to reinforce the resilience of life, rather than just annihilating adversaries outright. The goal is often to restore the natural order within us, to support our innate defenses, rather than just wiping out the invader entirely. Sometimes that's necessary, of course, but often it's about restoring balance.
So it's less brute force, more strategy.
Exactly. This is a peculiar kind of warfare, one that relies far more on knowledge, precision, understanding, than on just brute force. The physician in this context is maybe both strategist and diplomat, coaxing the body's immune system, helping it recognize the enemy, preparing invisible defenses. It's almost like a subtle negotiation with the forces within. So the doctor is less like a general commanding troops in an all-out assault, and maybe more like a skilled gardener, tending fragile soil, nurturing its inherent strength, protecting it from invasive weeds or pests, always aiming for long-term health and balance. Yet both roles, general and gardener, are engaged in the same fundamental task, ensuring the continuation of life.
Okay, I like that gardener analogy. And how has this arsenal, these forms of persuasion, how has it evolved over time? Thinking about massive discoveries like antibiotics. What did they reveal about this ongoing arms race against disease and about our place within it?
Well, think about antibiotics, the discovery of penicillin, for example. That was a true military revolution in this silent war. Absolutely game-changing. Before penicillin, a simple bacterial infection, a cut, pneumonia, could easily be fatal. It was terrifyingly common. Afterwards, vast categories of microbial enemies were subdued, almost overnight it seemed. It fundamentally altered the balance of power between humanity and the microbial world. It gave us this unprecedented sense of mastery, maybe even invincibility over many diseases. It was a stunning, almost miraculous shift.
But it didn't last, did it? The microbes fought back.
Exactly. As with all powerful weapons, the enemy adapted. As one source notes, bacteria developed resistance. The arms race resumed. And this is the cyclical pattern we see playing out relentlessly. In human warfare and in this biological struggle too, innovation is followed by counter-innovation. Attack is met by adaptation. The sword led to armor, armor led to gunpowder, gunpowder to ballistic missiles. It's constant escalation. In the same way, medicine invents vaccines, antivirals, new classes of antibiotics, only to find the microbial world adjusting its strategies, mutating, finding new ways to get around our defenses. It's relentless. We are basically caught in an eternal stalemate, a war with no final victory. It's this ongoing process that defines our very existence on a biological level.
So what does this really mean for us? Is this a war we can ever truly win in that traditional sense, like declare victory, war over, or is it something more fundamental, a permanent state we just have to learn to navigate?
I think it profoundly reinforces that idea of an ongoing, ceaseless struggle. Evolution never sleeps. That's the key phrase. Microbes don't need rest. They don't need treaties. They don't follow human rules. They are always rehearsing for the next assault. Ceaselessly adapting, mutating, finding new ways to persist. This isn't a conflict with a clear endpoint. No final peace accord, no grand surrender. It's a continuous negotiation, a delicate biological balance that's constantly being challenged and then reestablished.
And our own bodies reflect this.
Absolutely. Our very immune systems are living proof of this. They've been shaped by millions of years of evolutionary conflict with countless pathogens. Think about this. Every antibody you carry is the fossil of a war fought and remembered.
Wow. A fossil.
Yeah. Within your own body, you carry the biological memory of skirmishes, adaptations, victories that have allowed our species and you personally to survive through countless challenges. You are, in a very real sense, a library of battles past, carrying within you the intimate ancient history of humanity's ceaseless engagement with the microbial world. It's an intimate ancient part of who we are, woven right into our DNA.
A library of battles past. That's a truly profound thought. It suggests these struggles are literally etched into our very being. And these battles, these epidemics, they leave more than just biological traces, don't they? They leave deep marks on our culture, our memory, profoundly shaping how we see the world and ourselves.
Yeah, human wars, they often leave very visible monuments, don't they? Grand arches, heroic statues, solemn museums dedicated to remembering. But epidemics, our sources suggest, they leave something different, a quieter, maybe more insidious kind of memorial, one that works on a deeper, more subconscious level, perhaps. I think that's right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, epidemics primarily leave absences. Empty chairs at the family dinner table, forgotten graves in overcrowded cemeteries, sudden, unexplained silences in genealogical records. They leave this void, this gap in our collective story. But they also leave profound myths and cultural residues that deeply shape how we think about life, death, community, risk, our place in the world. They really alter our collective consciousness over time.
Can you give some examples of that?
Sure. We can see it throughout history. The Black Death, for instance, it didn't just decimate populations. It gave us that chilling, iconic image of the danse macabre, the medieval dance of death. Remember those woodcuts? Skeletons leading kings, peasants, popes, everyone in this universal procession towards mortality.
Right. Showing death comes for everyone.
Exactly. It was this cultural expression of the plague's indiscriminate power. Or the 20th century influenza pandemics. While they're often overshadowed in historical memory by the world wars, they happened alongside. Yeah, they profoundly reshaped public health systems. They spurred the growth of virology as a discipline. They gave birth to modern epidemiology as a scientific field. And even now, COVID-19. It has already etched indelible traces into our architecture, redesigned public spaces, the rise of remote work setups, into our politics, influencing everything from voting procedures to economic policy, and into our fundamental sense of distance from each other. That 6-foot rule isn't gone from our minds, is it?
No, it lingers.
And the key difference here, maybe, is that while human wars are often remembered in terms of victory or defeat, heroes and villains, epidemics tend to be remembered more in terms of endurance, survival. The question is never really who won. It's more fundamentally who survived and how did we change.
Okay, so this raises a really important question then. What do these relentless wars with disease, these recurring rituals, what do they ultimately reveal about us as a society, as a species? Can we simplify those lessons?
Yeah, I think they reveal several fundamental truths about humanity, things we maybe don't always want to look at. First, they reveal our profound interconnectedness. We talked about this. A cough in one busy city quickly becomes a crisis across continents. The pathogen respects no borders, no passports, no social distinctions. That comfortable fiction of isolation, of national sovereignty being an impenetrable shield, it just collapses in the face of a microscopic invader. We're reminded brutally clearly that the human race is one vast organism breathing together, a single vulnerable network. Our global arteries are also conduits for contagion. The health of one is intrinsically linked to the health of all.
Okay, interconnectedness. What else?
Second, they reveal our deep-seated inequalities. Starkly. Access to vaccines, clean water, adequate health care, ventilators, even just the ability to socially distance or work from home. These vary drastically. Across populations, nations, socioeconomic lines, disease itself might not discriminate biologically. A virus infects whoever it can, but socially it does. The poor die more often. Marginalized communities are more vulnerable. Essential workers bear a disproportionate burden of exposure and economic hardship. Epidemics aren't just wars of biology. They are profound wars of justice. They expose the deep flaws, the biases, the structural inequities in our social systems. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths about who bears the greatest burden, who pays the highest price.
The spotlight effect?
Exactly. Third, they reveal our inherent fear of the unseen. Unlike traditional wars where the enemy might be visible, a tangible force on the horizon, the pathogen lurks invisibly, in handshakes, on doorknobs, in the very air we breathe. And this invisibility produces a unique, pervasive kind of paranoia. A sense that danger saturates the everyday, that the threat can be anywhere, everywhere. It dissolves the boundary between safe and unsafe spaces, blurring lines that felt clear before. In a very real sense, everywhere is battlefield, and every interaction becomes a potential risk calculation, which erodes trust, fosters anxiety.
And last one.
Fourth, and maybe most tellingly, they reveal our deep, almost desperate human longing for meaning. In every epidemic throughout history, you always hear voices claiming it's punishment for sin, or a test from a higher power, or a divine signal of some kind. We as humans, we find it really hard to accept randomness as an explanation for such profound, widespread suffering and upheaval. War, at least, you can often explain by human motives, greed, power, ideology. But the sheer indifference of disease, its lack of malice, that terrifies us on some level. So we invent stories, we create narratives, we assign meaning to try and restore a sense of agency, to bring order to the chaos, even if it's a fabricated order.
We need it to make sense somehow.
Exactly. But the ultimate revelation, perhaps, the real takeaway is this. The true meaning lies not in why epidemics happen, because they are fundamentally a part of life on this planet, but in how we respond. Their true revelation is not about microbes, but about us. They hold up that unyielding, unforgiving mirror to who we truly are as a species, our strengths, our weaknesses, our compassion, and sometimes our cruelty.
Okay, so the war metaphor. Powerful, mobilizing, sure, but maybe ultimately inadequate for grasping this whole reality. Perhaps it's more accurately a profound confession about ourselves, a mirror into our own nature. What then is a more accurate, maybe more nuanced understanding of this ancient, intimate, and apparently ceaseless relationship we have with disease? Okay, let's try to wrap our heads around this then. If calling disease a war is maybe too simplistic or even misleading in how it makes us think and act, what's a better way? A more nuanced way to understand this ancient, ongoing struggle that clearly doesn't have a neat ending.
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, the metaphor war itself is ultimately inadequate, isn't it? Because unlike human conflicts, epidemics just cannot be defeated once and for all. They can't. They're woven into the very fabric of life. They're as ancient as the first cell that ever divided and replicated. So to call it war inherently suggests an endpoint, a victory, a final peace treaty. But the truth is far more haunting, maybe, and far more deeply embedded in our existence. This is a war that has no peace, this perpetual state of dynamic interaction, not a conflict with a final resolution.
So if not war, then what? What's a better metaphor?
Perhaps the more accurate metaphor, the one that gets closer to the truth, is symbiosis, a dark companionship, or maybe an uneasy coexistence. We in the microbes, we are locked together in an endless dance, shaping each other, defining each other constantly. Our evolution has been profoundly influenced by their presence, and often their survival depends on ours, or at least our interactions. I mean, without them, we wouldn't have evolved these incredibly sophisticated immune systems we have. And without us, many of them wouldn't spread as widely or evolve in the same ways. So we are enemies, yes, constantly in this state of push and pull, adaptation and counter-adaptation, but also reluctant partners in the strange theater of existence. It's an interdependence, however uneasy, however fraught with peril, and it has always been and will always be a part of life on Earth.
A dark companionship. I like that. Okay, and if our pandemic response has been, in part, this kind of ritual, this collective performance of purification, what's its ultimate purpose then? What's the final outcome? Even if the war component never truly ends, what does the ritual hope to achieve in the long run?
That's a great question. A ritual, at its core, is a technology of transformation. That's what rituals do. They're designed not just to mark time or perform duties, but to guide a person or an entire people across a threshold. From ignorance to knowledge, maybe, from one state of being to another. And this global ritual, this collective pandemic experience we all went through, it has undeniably changed us. The world is not the same. It cannot be the same as it was before. We have been, in a sense, initiated into a new and permanent state of awareness. A kind of low-grade, simmering anxiety about the invisible world that surrounds us, pervades us. We carry the memory of the lockdown in our bones, don't we? The phantom sensation of the mask on our faces, the ingrained habit of physical distancing and how we interact socially. These things linger.
They definitely do.
So the ultimate purpose of this liturgy, this global ritual, maybe it wasn't really to eradicate a single virus, which, as we discussed, is likely impossible in the long term anyway. Instead, maybe it was to fundamentally alter our consciousness. We now live with the profound, undeniable knowledge of our own fragility, the precariousness of the complex systems we depend on for everything: food, healthcare, connection, and the deep biological unity that makes a cough in a distant market a potential threat right here in our own living room. We are forced again and again by these events to acknowledge our place in a vast, interconnected, and often utterly indifferent web of life. We are forever changed by this initiation, whether we fully realize it yet or not.
So what does this all mean for us now moving forward? We've, performed the ablutions, we observed the sacraments, we went through the motions of the ritual. But I think for many people, there's still this gnawing unease that remains. Did the ritual actually work? Did we learn the lessons that were encoded in all that suffering? Or did we just perform a show? Maybe mistaking the surface actions for some deeper transformation that didn't quite happen.
That's the lingering, essential question, isn't it? The big one. We look at our hands, maybe, wondering if they are truly clean. wondering if the purification was complete, if the transformation truly took hold in our societies, in our actions. Did we merely go through the motions, mistaking the performance of piety for the attainment of grace? That's a haunting phrase from one source. Because this war with disease, this constant negotiation, this dark companionship, it is a form of haunting. It truly is. It is the ghost of our evolutionary past, returning repeatedly to remind us that we are guests on this planet, not its absolute masters. We forget that sometimes. It is the ghost of our collective actions, reminding us that every choice we make, every intrusion into nature, every systemic inequality we tolerate has profound, often unseen consequences that come back to haunt us. And the mirror that the pandemic held up to us, revealing all our vulnerabilities, our inequalities, our interconnectedness, that mirror has not been put away. It remains, always there, ready to reflect our next challenge, our next ritual, our next reckoning.
Wow. You've journeyed with us today through some really challenging territory, unseen battlefields and ancient rituals, exploring how we talk about, how we react to, and how we're forever changed by these global health crises. It's been a profound exploration, I think, of complex ideas, hopefully simplified for you, bringing perspectives to light that really challenge our usual ways of thinking.
Yeah, we've seen that the war metaphor, while it's definitely mobilizing, can often obscure the pathogens in different nature, and also its powerful role as a kind of societal scapegoat for all our collective anxieties. We've witnessed how our widespread responses, from something as simple as wearing masks to the quest for vaccines, take on the profound symbolic weight of a purification ritual, turning everyday things and actions into almost sacred gestures. And we've heard the Oracle's urgent, often unsettling messages about our fragile boundaries, our often destructive relationship with nature, and the stark, illuminating inequalities within ourselves, showing us things we often choose not to see.
And the takeaway seems to be that we are not just combatants in this ceaseless struggle. We are the terrain it's fought on. We're the chroniclers trying to make sense of it all. And we are the inheritors of its lasting impact, both biological and cultural. This isn't some aberration, is it? It's part of the grammar of life itself, an ancient, ongoing dialogue. The mirror remains. And in its reflection, maybe we can just begin to make out the shape of the next ceremony, waiting for its appointed hour to begin. So the final thought for you is, what will you call it? War, a dance, a dark companionship? Or will you perhaps leave it unnamed, accepting that some conflicts are just too ancient, too intimate, too woven into the fabric of existence to be captured by any single word? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep asking the big questions.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to the latest update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end, and see you in the next video.